Ever stood under a sky so wide your secrets felt small? Here on Cowboy Tyne's Story, we ride the stories of the West campfire, truths trail, dust memories, saloon whispers. Gritty humans, sometimes messy. Every tale is a horizon to chase. Subscribe, pull up a stool, and maybe find a little courage for your own frontier. The sun stood still over Mesquite Basin. Heat shimmered off the hardpan. A hawk circled once and vanished into sky white as bone. Cole Mercer knelt with his wrist tied behind his back. His cheek pressed the grit. Blood tasted like a penny at the back of his tongue. Boots crunched closer. Major Nathan Pike stopped in front of him and leveled a Colt at Cole's temple. The metal smelled of oil and old smoke. Pike's gloved hand turned a pocket watch with his thumb. Tick, tick. The sound found its way into Cole's skull. "Stubborn to the end," Pike said, voice flat. "You could have been a useful man." Hooves shifted in the ring of horses. Bo Reddick dismounted and held out a revolver to the woman standing off Pike's shoulder. "Go on, Greyhawk." "You're right." Nia Greyhawk took the gun. She moved like a current sliding around stone. Dust streaked her cheekbone. Her eyes held fire without heat. She met Cole's gaze as if they were the only two people in the basin. 3 months ago, she said, "Clear English, I would have done it." Reddick's grin stalled. Now Nia said, raising the barrel, "I know what you are afraid of." Her aim shifted. The blued steel kissed the center of Pike's chest. The pocket watch on his palm ticked louder. Darkness pressed at the edges of Cole's vision. The watch kept time. 3 months earlier. Cole worked the well rope hand over hand. The bucket dragged through stubborn water and came up muddy. His left shoulder burned like someone had hammered a hot nail into the joint years ago and left it there. He set the bucket down and let his breath even eyes on the ridge where the basin broke toward the south. The cabin leaned into a stand of juniper boards silvered by sun. One window, one door, behind it 9 stones and a low cairn. A line of ants crossed the dirt between his boots and the cairn. They worked without looking back. He checked the Winchester in the doorway. Cold wood against his palm steadied his mind. Hoofbeats scattered the hawk's shadow. 3 riders. Dust plumed. Cole stood where the shade of the porch cut a clean line across his boots. Bo Reddick led, beard like wire scar ripped through one eyebrow. The other 2 were Gus Tilson and Merritt Vale faces put together out of hard luck and worse choices. Cole Mercer Reddick called. Fine day. Cole did not lower the rifle, stayed it. Reddick swung down with a showy groan. "You never were a talker. Shame." He jerked a thumb toward Tilson's saddle. "Brought you a present." A figure slid from the saddle and hit the dirt on her knees. Hands bound hair matted with dust and dried blood. She lifted her head. Nia Greyhawk's eyes were sharp enough to cut the rope on their own. "Caught her near the border," Reddick said. "Major Pike wants Chief Taza's camp. You're going to find it, by any means." He smiled at the door at the window at the lonely piece of sky. 3 days. Or we tell Cedar Bluff you harbor savages." The antline broke and reformed between Cole's boots. He watched the dust, the light, the angle of guns. "Lever." "By any means," Reddick repeated softly, and let his hand rest near his pistol as if the metal itself might do the talking. "If she does not survive sometimes, that happens." They rode away with laughter that did not reach their eyes. Cole waited for the dust to settle. He let out the breath he had held. The rifle went to the jam. He crouched in the gritty sun with his knife and cut the cords at Nia's wrists. "I will tell you nothing," she said. Her English belonged to a mission school and to a woman who had decided what to keep of it. "I am not your enemy," Cole said. He said it again in words that tasted old in his mouth. They pulled a small startle in her. Then the muscles around her eyes returned to their work. He held out a hand. She got herself up. Inside, light braided through the dirty window. He washed the lashes on her back and the cuts at her hairline with boiled water. She did not thank him, which felt truer than thanks. He put a tin cup of water in her hand. Her fingers shook once and were still. "Bed," he said, nodding at the narrow frame. He set his pistol and knife on the table and slid them away from reach. He dragged the chair to the hearth. "You think you can sleep beside me?" she said dry. "If I wanted you dead, we would not be talking," Cole said. "You can watch me breathe all night." She did. The dream arrived like it always did. Heat and gun smoke. The shock of a woman's scream tearing in two. Huts of willow and reed at Sage Creek, going up like kindling. He ran and could not reach anyone. He saw a boy's hand under a door. He saw Jesse's face look toward him through flame, not blame, something worse. Then blankness like cold water poured into his chest. He woke with the chair under him and the knife out of reach by design. His shirt stuck to his back. He put his forearm over his eyes until he could breathe. "Jesse," Naya said in the dark. "You call for him." "No one," Cole said. He did not bother lying to himself. "The dead walk with us," she said, and turned her face toward the window as dawn came thin and gray. Daylight laid gold across the table. Cole poured water over his face, tasted the alkali bite. He found bread gone hard and sliced off the least hard of it. Naya sat on the bed with her spine straight and her hands open on her knees. Her wrists were raw where the rope had been. "You speak English like a teacher," Cole said. "I learned from people who called themselves that," she said. "They taught me hymns and subtraction. They forgot to teach mercy." Boots clicked in gravel. Cole moved to the window and kept his body to the side. A single rider turned up the lane. Eleanor Briggs reined in, jaw set and eyes bright from too many mornings like this one. "Brought you flour and coffee," she said, swinging down, "and biscuits you pretend not to like. You should not be here." "That is precisely why I am here." She glanced past Cole and saw Naya on the bed. Her mouth tightened and loosened. "So the rumors are true." "Close the door," Cole said. Eleanor stepped inside. She put the bundle on the table and took the room in. She had the spine of a fence post and the hands of someone who had pulled calves and buried husbands. "Cedar Bluff has itself a club now," she said. "They call it the Pioneer Guard. Pastor Amos Redding blesses them on Sundays. He says God loves a clean line on a map," Gold Cole said. "That word is getting thrown around with a lot of spitting. Sage Creek." She folded her arms. "Major Pike wears new insignia. He walks like a man who thinks the dirt belongs to him." Cole felt the old nail in his shoulder turn. Eleanor lowered her voice. "If you need help, hang a kerchief from your chimney. Blue, so I will know it is not a rag left there by wind. Mrs. Whitlow kept your room at the boarding house. Door to the alley still sticks on the bottom. A good kind of sticking." Cole nodded. "Thank you." She squeezed his forearm and looked once more at Naya, not fear, weighing. "You trust him," she said to Naya. It was not a question. Naya's face stayed in shadow. "I do not trust anyone who carries a watch and says time belongs to him." Eleanor snorted, which in her mouth was laughter. She stepped back into the hot light and was gone. Cole found the loose vent grill above the hearth and set it more snug. The screw would not bite. He turned it with a coin anyway. The old metal rattled a little. He could not make it stop. "Your name," Naya said. "Cole Mercer." "Naya," she said, "daughter of Taza Greyhawk." He had already known. He still nodded. They ate in quiet. Dust moved in the light as if the room breathed. Outside, a fly traced the rim of the bucket. The well chain clicked when the wind pulled it. "You will not take me to Pike," Naya said. "Not a question either." "No," Cole said. He looked at the 9 stones through the window. He put his palm on the sill where the paint had been rubbed off by years of hands like his. "There are names under those, some mine to keep, some not mine." Naya followed his glance and said nothing. The line of ants found their groove again under the window. Evening laid a warmer shade across the room. Cole stepped out and sat on the porch. Juniper sap hung sweet in the air. Somewhere far off, a storm dragged a single dark finger across the horizon. For a second, he thought he smelled creosote waking under first drops miles away. The basin had a way of offering ghosts like that. He thumbed Jesse's old pocket watch. The glass was spidered. The second hand still fought its way around. Tick, tick. Inside, Naya found a clean rag and tied it around her forearm. Blue against brown skin. She watched him watching the ridge as if it could be coaxed to tell the future. Hoofbeats again. Not one rider. 3. Dust coming straight from the Cedar Bluff Road, quick and sure. Tilson's hat brim cut the light. Reddick's beard drank it. Vale rode low and ready. Cole stood. He felt the board under his foot. He felt the weight of the room at his back and the weight of the basin in his chest. He did not move his hand toward the rifle yet. He kept it loose at his side. The riders did not slow. The pocket watch ticked in his palm. Reddick's horse slid to a stop in a spray of grit. Tilson and Vale fanned out without speaking. Dust stung the back of Cole's throat. He kept his hand easy at his side and let the porch shade cut him in half. "Your 3 days," Reddick said. His eyes never smiled. "You make it easy or you make it loud." "I have what Pike wants," Cole said. "He hears it from me or he hears nothing." Tilson's fingers walked over the handle of his whip. He said, "By any means." Tell him to meet me at Split Ridge, noon tomorrow, no crowd. Cole kept his voice even. He gets his answers from the source. Reddick looked at the window, at the single door, at the basin that swallowed men for less. He tasted the air like a man deciding if a storm would hold. You bring the woman. No, Cole said. She stays. You want me there on time, you do not drag a prisoner through this heat. Vale's horse shifted and blew. Reddick's jaw worked. You miss the hour Major Pike will come collect his own. His eyes tracked past Cole to the bed where Naya sat spine straight, and he will not be gentle. Then tell him not to be late, Cole said. Reddick spat to the side. He hauled himself back into the saddle and turned without another word. The three riders lifted dust and were gone. For a long breath, the yard held only heat and the small click of the well chain. Cole set the rifle against the jamb and looked at Naya. You bought time, she said. For us. He wiped his palm on his shirt. The watch lay cool there. The second hand kept its slow work. We move when the dark comes. Where her eyes tested him. Where the water runs cold, Cole said. Where your father watches the sky. Naya studied him, as if the room itself had asked a question. Then she nodded once. He sharpened his knife on the porch step and wrote 3 words on a scrap for Eleanor. He tucked it in the coffee tin by habit, the lid that always clicked a little when closed. He lifted the loose floorboard and slid the few papers he kept into the gap. Not much worth hiding, and still he hid it. They packed light, dried meat a canteen, each one blanket. Naya tied the blue kerchief tighter. Cole checked the saddle cinch with care his hands remembered even when his mind ran ahead. He looked back once at the low shape of the cabin and the 9 stones. Heat pressed sound away. The basin held its breath. They took the wash east where the sand held prints for a day and no longer. Stars rose hard and close. The horse's hooves thudded soft in the arroyo, a rhythm that settled behind the tick of the watch in Cole's pocket. Riders, Naya whispered after an hour, her head tilted to the night the way a coyote listens to grass. Cole did not hear them until she pointed. A small scrape, then nothing. Yours. Mine. She eased in the saddle. No sudden moves. They came out of the dark like pieces of it had agreed to walk. 3 men, faces shadowed with paint that made their eyes seem larger. The one in front wore a hawk feather at his braid. He held a bow low and ready. Naya lifted her hand palm out and spoke. The hawk-feathered man answered with a single short word. He shifted his gaze to Cole and let it rest there. Then he gave a smaller nod to Naya. My cousin Rafe, Naya said. He wants you blindfolded when we reach the sacred land. Cole reached into his pocket for the strip of cloth he had cut from an old shirt. Fair. Rafe made a sound that might have been approval. He touched 2 fingers to his chest and turned his horse. They rode on in a stretched-out line, the desert opening and closing around them. Near dawn, Rafe led them into a shallow cave with a ceiling low enough to make Cole bow his head. The air smelled of old ash and damp stone. Someone had left a small pile of juniper sticks arranged to take a spark. The ground was cool where night had held on. Rest, Naya said. Day travels slow. Eyes see too much. Cole sat with his back on the rock and ate in small bites. Rafe stood at the entrance like part of the wall. His bow did not lower. When he spoke, it was in their language and then in thick English for Cole. You carry ghosts, Rafe said. I do, Cole said. Do not bring them where the children sleep, Rafe said. He looked out at the slit of brightening sky. We go. They rode blindfolded when Naya's voice told Cole it was time. Cloth took away the sharpness of the world. The horse under him became the one solid fact. He smelled willow and heard a different kind of water than the shallow wash. Bird calls layered over each other. When the cloth lifted light made his eyes ache. The hidden valley lay quiet and green between teeth of stone. Cottonwoods threw shade across a creek, bright as a sliver of mirror. Smoke from cooking fires lifted straight up. Shelters stood in a wide ring, some woven, some of stone. People stopped what they were doing and stared. Hands found tools. Children drew closer to skirts. No one ran. No one smiled. A man crossed the clearing with a steadiness that made a line through the stillness. He looked older than the years in his face. His hair was grayer than the braid that hung down his back. His shirt was clean and mended. His eyes were not kind and not cruel. They were exact. Taza Greyhawk, Naya said softly. Taza took her into his arms for the space of a breath. He let her go and turned his full attention to Cole. You were at Sage Creek, he said. His English had the shape of schooling and the weight of a man who measured words. You carry that place in your shoulders. Yes, Cole said. Why are you in my valley alive? Taza asked. Because your daughter decided not to kill me, Cole said. He kept his hands easy and his back straight. Taza's mouth made a movement that was not a smile. Come. They went to a larger shelter where books sat on a plank shelf beside stone mortars. A map lay open on a table. Marks in charcoal cut across it like scars. Rafe stood in the doorway. Two elders sat by the fire and watched without blinking. Cole told them what he had seen at Sage Creek. He told them in pieces that found their own order. The way the first hut lit, the boy's hand under the door, the way the air sounded when rifles stopped for a moment and the fire talked instead. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not offer defense. Rafe's jaw clenched. One elder nodded once and kept nodding long after the story had ended. Taza did not move until Cole fell quiet. Major Pike seeks gold, Taza said. He tapped a point on the map. Here, Sierra Mining Syndicate owns paper that says this place is empty. Pastor Redding teaches men to love the line that makes it so. You say you have proof. Pieces, Cole said. Enough to pull more loose if I can get close. Taza looked at Naya. You trust him. I do not trust the man he was, Naya said. I trust the way his eyes are when he speaks of the boy at Sage Creek. Words are air, Rafe said. Which is why we will not use only words, Taza said. He moved a stone on the map from one X to another. Cedar Bluff is a day by horse if the wind is with you. Mrs. Whitlow keeps a room at the back of her house for more difficult guests. Eleanor Briggs knows which door sticks. You will go and bring back more than air. He let go of the map and looked again at Cole. You will not travel alone. Rafe took a step in. I go. No, Taza said. You are needed here. His eyes slid to Naya. She will go. 2 more will follow far enough to keep you honest and close enough to keep you alive. Rafe wanted to protest again. One look from Taza put his mouth back in a line. We leave when the light softens, Naya said. They slept for a few hours on mats that smelled of soap root and smoke. When they rose, the heat had eased enough that breath felt like air again. Rafe handed Cole a skin of cool water without a word. Children stared at the stranger and then did what children do and went back to their games. They took the west cut out of the valley where the rocks swallowed sound. Naya did not blindfold him this time. He had earned that much. The desert returned in full and shook the green out of their eyes. A dust devil sketched a line across the flats and fell apart. Cedar Bluff climbed out of the basin in a scrape of buildings and fences. Music leaked from the copper spur and mixed with laughter and the clink of glass. The church sat white on the square. A flyer on its door read in neat hand about order and duty. Men with white armbands leaned on posts and watched everything. The smell of peppermint drifted from the corner house where Pastor Redding kept his study. Smoke curled from a vent over the saloon's back room and left a stain on the wall above it. Mrs. Whitlow opened her side door before they knocked. She had a face that told you what she thought, and hands that told you she would help anyway. She glanced past them to the street and shut the door quick. You took your time, she said to Naya, and you brought a storm with you. She pointed at the floor. Mud stays at the threshold. Eleanor had sent word. The clothes lay on the bed. A sober suit for a man who read ledgers. A blue dress that would not draw the wrong kind of attention. A hat with a small veil. Spectacles with clean glass. Mrs. Whitlow tugged Cole's collar until it sat right and smoothed the dress at Naya's shoulders. You will be Mr. and Mrs. Stone, she said, from Denver. You speak little, you smile less, and you count everything. The back door, Cole said. Sticks at the bottom, she said. It always has. Do not make it a habit to use it. She led them to a small room that smelled of starch and sun. Cole set Jesse's watch on the dresser and listened to the second hand chew through the silence. Mrs. Whitlow stood at the doorway, one hand on the frame, and gave him a look that weighed and did not flinch. 3 o'clock, she said. Pastor Redding will receive you in his study. Outside, a card player laughed too loud. The piano missed a note and found the next one. The vent above the copper spur let out a thin thread of smoke into the evening heat. The scent of peppermint grew stronger in the hallway. Cole picked up the watch and slid it into his pocket. The glass touched his palm, cracked and cool. Naya pinned the blue kerchief under her cuff where only a corner showed. The room held its breath. They opened the door. At 3, the church bell gave a tired clang. Mrs. Whitlow lifted her chin, and they stepped into the heat dressed as Mr. and Mrs. Stone. Cole's collar scratched his neck. Naya's veil made a soft shadow across her eyes. The street wrote its usual lines men at posts a piano hiccup from the copper spur white armbands by the hitch rail. Pastor Amos Redding's maid opened at their knock. Peppermint and furniture polish met them in the hall. The study held a desk with neat stacks, leather spines on shelves, a brass cross that caught the light without warmth. Redding stood with a hand pressed flat on a ledger, as if he could stop a page from turning by will alone. He smiled with his mouth. His eyes did their own work. "Mr. and Mrs. Stone," he said, "welcome to Cedar Bluff. We are always pleased to meet patrons of progress." Cole let a softer eastern shape touch his voice. "We like to see a town that minds its accounts." "God loves order," Redding said, "and order hates vacancy." He gestured to chairs. "Your letter said you are interested in ventures here." "We are interested in ventures that do not wobble," Cole said. His hand brushed his pocket where the watch ticked steady as a drip in a cave. Naya's gloved fingers came to rest on the arm of her chair. She said nothing and watched. Redding spoke of growth of crops of freight lines, then of unrest, said as if speaking to a physician. He paused on the word defense and tasted it. Major Pike is a practical man. He understands that a secure border is a moral obligation. Cole's gaze drifted without hurry. The filing cabinet, the corner stack of rolled maps, the small metal box caged by the desk shadow. "My wife tires easily on long roads," he said when Redding paused. Her throat would thank a glass of water. Redding rang a bell. The maid came and went. The thin note of the bell hung in the air like a gnat. Cole set his pocket watch down on the desk beside a paperweight shaped like a horse. Naya lifted her glass and the veil shifted, making a half moon over her cheek. Redding watched them with the patience of a man accustomed to confessions. "Our congregation plans an expansion," he said. "I would be honored to show you the sanctuary, and perhaps this evening you would join me and Major Pike for supper. We can speak plainly away from the bustle." "That would be a kindness," Cole said. They walked the cool nave while Redding talked pews and temperance. Cole nodded at the appropriate places and thought of bolts and locks. Back in the study, he patted his coat and made a small sound. His hand came up empty. "My watch," he said. "Forgive me." Redding's smile did not move his cheeks. Hattie showed Mr. Stone to the study. The maid led him back. Light fell across the desk in a clean rectangle. The room waited. Cole crossed the floor without hurry. He opened the bottom drawer and found brass the box with a cheap lock and a polished lid. He took out his knife, thumbed the point against the keyhole, and turned with a pressure he knew. The lock surrendered with a tiny swallow. Inside paper with weight. Letters signed N. Pike. A map with boundaries that looked like a net lines around water and shade. A contract stamped with Sierra Mining Syndicate and the neat fields of shares. One page spoke plain about obstacles, one line about witnesses. Cole's jaw tightened until it ached. He took out his small notebook and wrote what needed to be carried without hands. Names, dates, amounts, a sentence that did not bother with euphemism. Boot steps in the hall. He set the pages, as they had been turned the keyhole to its proper angle, slid the drawer shut. The surface of the desk held 2 scratches. He set the watch between them. Redding entered with his coat back on and the peppermint back strong. "There it is," he said. "Time lost is time untrusted." Cole pocketed the watch. The glass was cool, and the crack under his thumb felt deeper. "My thanks." 6 o'clock, Redding said. "We will have roast and conversation." At Mrs. Whitlow's, they adjusted small things without words. A tighter knot, a seam smoothed flat. Naya sat by the window and let herself be still. Cole wound the watch 1 turn. The second hand jumped and settled. Redding's table was laid with care. White cloth. A bowl of apples that remembered the tree. Major Nathan Pike stood by the mantel with a glass and a face set, as if it had been carved that way. Silver at his temples, new bars on his collar, no dust on his boots. Mr. Stone, Pike said. His hand was dry and the grip competitive. "Denver produces a certain type of man. We tend to like our columns to add up," Cole said. He held the eastern vowel in place and felt his own jaw want to fight it. Pike glanced at Naya. "Mrs. Stone, you improve the room." Naya bowed a fraction. Her eyes did not linger. Redding saw everything and poured the wine. They ate soup and said the polite nothing that keeps knives where they belong. The roast came and talk shifted to roots and claims. Redding told a story about a family who needed protection. Pike said patrols increased strain on a limited force. Cole asked careful questions about shipments, about the weight of ore, about how long a vein lasts. Pike's gaze sharpened at that last. For a breath his tongue found his cheek and pressed there. Some opportunities prefer a quiet cradle, Redding said. He cut his meat in exact squares. We can discuss finer points after dessert. The apple pie tasted of cinnamon, and a day not like this one. Naya set her fork down and put a fingertip to her temple. "If you would forgive me," she said. "Travel sits strangely for me." Cole pushed his chair back at once, all concern where anyone could see it. "We should not abuse our hosts with our fatigue. Perhaps we might continue this conversation tomorrow at your office, Major." Pike weighed the room, then gave a small concessioning nod. 10. I will have maps you will enjoy. The street met them with an evening that had held heat too long. They walked at a pace that matched respectability and turned where Mrs. Whitlow's fence cut the glare. Inside the room, the lamplight made a circle like a stage. Cole took off the spectacles and set them on the dresser beside the watch. The glass gave back the flame in a broken arc. "Now," Naya said. The Copper Spurs alley smelled of stale beer and horse. The back door had a latch, meant for men who believed doors should hold. Naya's thin knife found the space it needed. The storeroom held barrels, crates, stenciled with bran sawdust that packed down to silence. A vent ran high on the wall, a square mouth with a metal grill. Smoke came and went there in slow breaths. They climbed a short stack of crates and pressed their ears close. The wall was thin in its own way. Music from the saloon circled beneath deeper voices. The couple, a voice said. Redding's polish without the pulpit. Eastern names change like hats. "They stink of fake," Reddick said. "Let me tug the thread." "No," Pike said. "If they have friends, tugging shows them the knot. We move on schedule. I do not let opportunity walk out because of two strangers who fancy themselves clever." Glasses touched. 3 days, Pike said. His tone was dry business. First light. Ghost needle. Lark marked the ridge and the path through the east cut. Reddick, you turn the guard white with talk of raids. Redding your flock prays hard and looks the other way. Redding poured more. "Paperwork will be in order by the time the ore sees daylight." He paused. And what of Harlow? He caught himself. Mercer. What of Mercer? "If he shows in any direction, I double the patrols," Pike said. "Wanted notices are already posted." He thinks like a soldier who remembers rules. That makes him predictable. Wood creaked in the saloon as someone leaned a chair back. A piano ran up a scale and fell off it. Cole felt his pulse in his teeth. Naya's breath came quiet and steady beside him. Her hand lay on the crate, the blue kerchief peeking under the cuff. "Enough," she mouthed. They slid down into the dark and stitched their way through the stacks to the alley. The latch clicked into place behind them. Night had let the heat go at last. A breeze moved and carried the smell of dust and distance. They cut across to the back of the livery where shadows collected like men who did not wish to be seen. A match scraped. Sulfur flared. A face lit up raw and yellow. One of the white armbands took shape from the dark. He saw Cole's trimmed hair and clean collar and looked past them toward the street, as if a respectable couple might be hunting a lost horse. Then the flame burned low and lifted. The light found Cole's eyes full on. It found Naya's cheek, the veil folded into her pocket now. Recognition pulled the man's mouth into a longer shape. "It is him," he said, and the word carried like a bell. He reached for his pistol. The other man stumbled in a scramble for his own. Cole moved on instinct. He shoved the match striker into the stacked sacks. The flame died on burlap. The first shot sounded too loud. Splinters lifted off a crate and peppered his sleeve. The horses in their stalls banged wood and screamed. Naya shifted low and fast. Her boot caught a wrist and the pistol clanged on stone. Another shout from the street. Boots pounded the alley gravel. The night closed in with noise. The watch thudded once against Cole's ribs as he ran. The second hand kept time. Gunfire broke open the night behind the livery. Splinters sprayed Cole's sleeve. A horse screamed and kicked a stallboard loose. Naya cut left into a seam between buildings, and Cole stayed on her shoulder. Boots pounded the alley gravel. Shouts multiplied, bounced off wood and tin. Two figures stepped into their path, armbands white against the dark. One raised a pistol and caught a kick to his wrist before he could fire. The gun skittered and struck a barrel. Cole took the second man low and felt ribs flex under his shoulder. A third voice yelled from the street. Too many. An arrow hissed and bit into the dirt between armbands. Another thunked into a post near a face and turned it pale. Rafe stood at the corner with his bow already bent again, two men at his back, paint dull in the dim. His voice cut the noise and made a clear path. Naya answered and grabbed Cole's arm. They ran. They vaulted a fence and crossed a yard where laundry snapped like startled birds. A dog hit the end of its chain and howled. Rafe's men moved like the night understood them. They found the gap between two stacked wagons and took it sideways. A bullet clipped a board and whined into the lane. The town bell started up with a pulsing clang that made the dark feel smaller. Past the last fence, the ground opened. The desert met them with low scrub and exposed root. They followed the hard line of an irrigation ditch until the ditch ended and the arroyo picked up the thread. Breath burned clean. Hooves drummed behind, then fell away when the arroyo narrowed and bent. They ducked under a lip of rock and huddled in a shadow that held cool air. Rafe listened to the space above them. Nothing moved there now but wind. Split, Rafe said. He kept his voice just above the whisper of his own breath. You to the governor. Naya to Ghost Needle. Cole nodded. It felt like agreeing with a stone. He still said yes. Naya stepped close. She touched the place on his arm where the fabric had burned and left a thin white mark earlier that day at Mrs. Whitlow's stove. Do not use the road, she said. They will watch it. Follow the dry ridge until you smell cattle. Then cut south. He took the blue corner at her wrist and tucked it under her cuff. The kerchief stays with you. Her mouth made a shape that was not a smile. I know where I am going. Rafe signaled, and a horse appeared out of the dark as if led by the dark itself. Fresh ears forward saddle light. Another horse ghosted in for Naya. Rafe pressed a skin of water into Cole's hand. He put his own palm against Cole's chest for a second, the way men do when words will waste time. Then he turned without looking back and was gone. Cole swung up and kept the animal to a careful pace until the open land had taken the town out of his ears. The watch settled into the line of his ribs and found its rhythm. The stars felt near enough to cut your fingers if you reached wrong. He let the horse pick its way along the ridge. When the wind shifted, he smelled cow and creosote. The creosote was memory and promise both. By first light, he came on a low canyon that held a thread of water. The horse took it like a prayer. A figure stood at the bend and lifted a palm, not a threat. An Apache boy no older than 12. He said a name that belonged to Rafe and pointed at a narrow goat track out of the wash. The boy's eyes were wide and serious, and then he was gone, swallowed by a willow clump. Cole pushed on. Dust lifted off the horse's legs in dull clouds and settled back where it had been. Once a shot clipped a rock near his knee and left a bright scar. He slid from the saddle and found mesquite thick enough to make him small. A man with a varmint rifle stood on a rise and tried to keep his sight steady. The range was too long. The next shot threw grit and nothing else. Cole moved in angles the rifle could not answer and left the man to his own echo. Santa Fe breathed heat even at the edge of evening. Lights made islands in the streets. The territorial building on the plaza wore its lamps late. 2 sentries eyed Cole's dust and his clean collar with equal doubt. He asked for Governor Henry Calhoun and said the name low and direct. He kept his hands where they could see them. He let the watch tick and said nothing more. A clerk with ink on his fingers brought him into a room with a map of the territory on one wall and a safe in the corner left open like a mouth taking air. Governor Calhoun set a pen down and studied Cole as if measuring a slope he might ride. You are Mercer Calhoun said. You made noise earlier this year. I made the wrong kind of quiet 2 years ago, Cole said. He laid his notebook on the desk and opened it to the pages that mattered. He put 3 small nuggets of gold beside the paper. They held the lamplight like they had practiced. Calhoun read. The pen marks in the margin told Cole where the man had paused. He touched one of the nuggets with the side of his finger. Names, Calhoun said. Dates, amounts, what you overheard. Enough to stop a morning, Cole said, not enough to keep a man like Pike from moving before anyone checks the ink. Calhoun pinched the bridge of his nose and then looked up. His eyes had the weariness that sleep does not answer. He rang a bell. Send to Cedar Bluff, he told the clerk who came. Immediate. Investigators to Pastor Redding's study. Secure anything with a seal or signature. And wire Fort Merrow to hold Major Nathan Pike pending my review. Stand down any action against Ghost Needle until I arrive. The clerk fled with the paper like it might burn him. Calhoun capped his inkwell and stared at the map of the valley with its teeth of stone. You have a way back that gets you there faster than a telegraph can convince men, he said. I have people who run faster than wires, Cole said. Calhoun nodded once. No blessing, no speech. Go. Cole left by the side door that dropped into a narrow alley. The horse he had tied there worked its bit and pushed its nose into his shoulder. The night rode on with him when he left the edge of the city and the lights fell away like beads cut loose. An hour before dawn, he saw a smudge on the horizon that could be dust, could be morning, could be both. The approach to Ghost Needle ran through a low saddle of rock. From there, he could see the cut into the valley. The mouth of the canyon had gone from open to broken. Fallen trunks and stones made a neat mess. The ridge above it grew eyes. Men lay behind rocks with bows and rifles set. Their bodies took the shape of the land. The creek's sound reached him as a ribbon over stone. On the flat dust showed an organized mind. Pike's column counted near 20. Volunteers and soldiers mixed with no harmony in their coats. Pike sat his horse and talked hard with an officer who did not hide his doubt well. 2 white armbands kept glancing at each other like boys who had lied and felt the lie at their backs. Cole slid down the slope into a band of shadow and walked out into light where both sides could see him. He did not lift his hands. The air felt close and watched. Pike, he said. He did not raise his voice far. It carried anyway. Pike turned and drew his pistol like it was part of his body. 2 soldiers rushed up and took Cole's arms rough enough to make it look right. The barrel pressed cold into the side of Cole's head. Last requests waste time, Pike said. The line of his mouth did not move. Something near his eye did. These men deserve to know why their boots are pointed at a creek, Cole said. He kept his eyes hard on Pike's face and his voice level. You are not here for defense. You are here to clear witnesses off a claim. Sierra Mining will write letters of thanks if you do it clean. The men behind Pike shifted. A cough dropped and did not return. The officer at Pike's shoulder stared past Pike like a man doing math. Pike's finger tightened. It did not finish. You think men care about words when they carry rifles, he said. Stand aside, Lieutenant, sir, the officer said. The governor's office sent a wire. Fort Merrow confirmed receipt. Pike did not take his gun off Cole. Paper, he said, that is all it is. A man on the ground makes choices paper cannot. Cole raised his voice without shouting. It hit the line of soldiers and stayed there. Pastor Redding's study is open and empty now. They are pulling contracts out of his drawers with your name on them. Your letters to him, your share percentages. They will bring those pages here with seals on them. Faces turned. 2 men lowered their rifles an inch and then found them again. Someone whispered the word contract like they had never heard it in their own mouth. A figure appeared on the ridge over the canyon. Naya stood tall as a fence-post bow-strung arrow laid. She was not alone. 5 more rose behind her along the rock in a spaced line. They did not aim at hearts. They aimed in a way that made every hand below aware it could be a heart if things bent wrong. Do not, Naya called. Her voice came clear and heavy with sky. You are looking at homes. You are not looking at a war. Silence ran out across the flat like a slow wave. The creek kept its own small song. Cole felt the second hand of the watch push past a scratch. Hoofbeats came from the south, not rushed, not slow, a dust crest that moved with command. Colonel Whitaker rode at the front with 2 marshals and 6 soldiers with clean coats, behind a second group with a different weight to their saddles. Governor Calhoun among them had low jaw set. Whitaker swung down and did not take his eyes off Pike. "By order of the governor," he said. His voice had iron wrapped in cloth. "All operations here are suspended. Stand your men down." Pike did not lower the gun. His eyes slid to Calhoun and away. "Sir, the situation on the ground requires immediate action." Calhoun stepped forward. "Your situation is this. Cedar Bluff yielded documents this morning that bear your name on plans to remove obstacles and profit thereby. Pastor Redding is in custody. He is not keeping your secrets." A sound moved through the line of soldiers like wind through grass. Heads turned. A white armband took a step back without deciding to. The officer glanced at Whitaker and found the answer he needed there. "Drop the weapon," Major Whitaker said. For a heartbeat, Pike did not. In that beat, Cole could taste metal in his mouth again and count 10 pebbles under his knee. Then Pike eased the pistol down and let it hang by one finger. A marshal took it, and then his hands. The leather hissed when the cuffs settled. Pike stepped in close as far as the iron let him. He did not waste words. "You make enemies," he said. His breath smelled like brandy and something burnt, the kind that live longer than paper. Naya watched from the ridge without moving. Rafe raised a hand, and the archers unstrung their bows, one by one, a quiet sequence like a comb through hair. The barricade stayed, but the tension leaked out of it like a held breath let go. Whitaker sent 2 soldiers to open a gap in the ricks of stone so wagons could pass if they must. The volunteers with armbands took a good look at their boots and found reasons to be somewhere else. One of them crossed himself and stopped halfway through it as if remembering which hand he used. The wind shifted. The creosote woke and put its smell on the air. It smelled like rain that had not reached ground yet. Calhoun stood with his hands behind his back and listened to the creak. He looked up at Naya. He looked at Cole. He gave a small nod to both and to neither. Then he turned to Whitaker and spoke low. The watch in Cole's pocket clicked on. He put his fingers on it and felt the crack in the glass like a map line he knew by heart. He closed his hand until the metal warmed. Above, Naya lowered her bow. Rafe touched her shoulder and said something that did not need translation. Below, men set rifles at their sides and let their shoulders drop. Dust lifted in a lazy swirl and fell. The creek kept on. Rain came in from the south in a sheet so thin you had to look sideways to see it. The first drops hit the porch roof and spread a tin whisper across the boards. Cole Mercer stood at the edge of his rebuilt steps and watched the ground darken in blotches that joined and ran. The cabin stood taller than before. He had widened the porch and cut 2 new windows to let the light find the corners. The door swung on a hinge that did not complain. Inside the floor held a table that did not wobble and a chair that did not bite at his back. The Winchester rested above the jamb, cleaned and oiled. Behind the cabin, the 9 stones kept their small hill. He had set a ring of river rock around them and planted desert marigold and globe mallow in a crescent that would take color when the rain settled. He worked the soil with his hands, and the smell of creosote rode the air. The plants were small and stubborn. They had the look of things that would hold on. From the ridge, a rider came in slow through the thin rain. Naya Greyhawk moved like she belonged to the weather. Her hair was braided and tied with a strip of blue. Her shirt was clean and mended her leggings dusty from roads that had not learned to be gentle. The horse shivered its skin and shook water off in a silver spray. She swung down by the well and led the mare under the eave. "You built straight," she said. "You taught me not to waste nails," he said. Her eyes went to the ring of stones, then to the curve of green coming up. She stood in the smell of wet dust and listened to the new sound of the world with rain in it. "They keep their names," she said, meaning the stones. "They do," Cole said. She touched one marigold leaf with the back of her finger and let it go. "This keeps the road." He nodded. The pocket watch lay in his palm and ticked. The glass was still cracked, but the second hand ran smooth and even. He closed his hand and felt the weight. Word had moved across the territory in the brittle way news breaks and then settles. Pastor Amos Redding had given a statement and signed it in the presence of marshals and a man with a ledger. He sat in a cell and chewed peppermint leaves he no longer liked. Cedar Bluff's Pioneer Guard had gone out of fashion the way a fever does. White armbands stopped looking proud and started looking foolish. Sierra Mining Syndicate sent a man with a hat and a face like old bark. He took their contract back and left it in the governor's safe where the seal could keep it from wandering into fire. Fort Merrow posted orders where soldiers could read them without standing on tiptoe. Major Nathan Pike would answer to a court that kept a long table and a clock that counted without mercy. Colonel Whitaker spent more time looking at maps than at charges for ammunition. Men who had kept their heads down began to lift them a little. A week after the stand at Ghost Needle, Governor Henry Calhoun came to the valley with a small party and no speeches. He stood with Taza Greyhawk under cottonwood shade and read from a paper written in a clear hand. The paper described boundaries and water and who would not cross without saying so first. It did not promise what it could not keep. It did not take more than it had to take to satisfy men who measured things with string. Taza held the page and read the words himself before he touched the pen. The pen scratched. The cottonwoods lifted their leaves and set them down. Eleanor Briggs rode out to Cole's place with a bag of flour and a sack of coffee that was not cheap. She stood at the porch and looked inside and did not hide the way her eyes softened. "A room looks different when it expects company," she said. "Mrs. Whitlow told me to tell you her back door still sticks. She likes that kind of honesty in a door." "She keeps mine as well," Cole said. He did not say that he had kept his own door unlocked since the day after Ghost Needle. Eleanor saw it anyway. She touched his forearm and squeezed, then scooped the rain off the rail with the side of her hand and let it fall on her shoe. "That is a respectable leak," she said to the roof. "It will make music for a while." She left with the rain in her shoulders and her hat brim shining. Rafe came alone one night and sat by the creek boot set where the water could soak the leather. He set his bow aside and told a story about a boy who had stepped into the current up to his knees and had not washed away. He let it end without naming the boy. When he rose, he put a palm on Cole's shoulder and left his hand there a breath longer than he needed to. Then he went into the trees where cricket calls climbed and fell. When Naya came back from council at Ghost Needle that afternoon, she carried news the valley would hold to its side of the line and that wagons would be allowed to pass if they did not stop to plant stakes. She had sat with elders whose hair shone white as salt and had argued for half a day in low voices. She did not bring the arguments with her. She set the news down and let it be. Cole lifted a pot off the stove and set it on the table. Bread and beans and onions ran together in a way that belonged to the smell of this cabin. Steam rose into the rafters. Naya shook water from her sleeves and sat. They ate and said little. After they walked out to the porch and watched the rain make its careful lace in the dust. The basin held its new color a deeper brown that let the eye rest. The juniper sap grew sweet under the wet. Somewhere far off, thunder spoke like someone clearing their throat. The watch ticked. "You said yes," Naya said. "She did not ask." Territorial Ranger Cole said. Calhoun wanted someone who knows which way a creek bends when it has a mind. "You will work between maps and people," Naya said. "You will bring letters and take replies. You will stand in rooms where eyes do not agree." "I will ride," he said. She watched him in the rain and the line of the ridge. "Taza asked me to keep walking in both directions," she said. "My feet know how now." He let that sit. The smell of creosote deepened as the drops fattened. The marigold leaves trembled and gathered beads on their edges. Water ran off the roof in thin chains. She turned to face him and set her hand on the rail. Her fingers were wet. "There is a room here," she said, "and you have cut a second window." "It needs another chair," he said. She looked inside, then back at him. Her mouth found a shape that matched the day. "We will find one." They did not talk about seasons. They did not promise years. They set a blanket folded on a shelf and a spare cup on a hook and left the door unlatched. Toward evening, the rain thinned to a fine shake and then to a memory on the air. The ground held its dark, and the marigolds lifted their faces. Light slid under the clouds and set the rim of the ridge on fire for a minute and then let it cool. The creek behind the cabin spoke louder than it had that morning. Cole walked to the cairn and set his palm on the top stone. The surface was warm from the day and damp from the rain. He did not say any names. The watch ticked. He heard Naya moving in the kitchen, the small sounds that tell you a room has someone in it. He turned and saw her in the doorway with her hands on the frame. The blue strip of cloth at her wrist was darker with water. She looked past him to the garden and then to the sky that had given it a chance. "Stay," he said. She stepped onto the porch and stood next to him and watched the last drops find the dirt. The smell of creosote rose once more and then eased. Far off, coyotes started their talk and then let the song fall away. The basin breathed like a chest that had been tight and was less so. Inside, the clock on the mantel had not been wound. It did not matter. The pocket watch kept its own time. The second hand climbed and cleared the scar on the glass and went on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.